Coffee shops, they're typically a place for gathering. They're a place for connecting and community. They're typically a place where you see tables and chairs and laughter and coffee and tea and pastries. But right now, all over, not just our community and our country, but all over our globe right now, what we're seeing is the absence of that. There's no tables. There's no chairs. There's no people here communicating because of this global pandemic that we're all experiencing together. This whole coronavirus. In 2005, in the Trafalgar Square in London, Nelson Mandela gave one of the most epic speeches of our modern era. And he challenged the crowd there that day. And he looked at all of humanity and he said, sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great. And he looked at them that day and he said, you be that generation. Hey, Macy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for the coffee.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, hi. My name is Billy Sanderson, and I'm the leadership development guy at US Compliance. As we look at what does it mean to be great, what does it mean for this generation to rise up right now and to meet the complex challenges of our time, we want to talk today about 7 characteristics, 7 principles of communicating in the midst of chaos. 7 thoughts, 7, behaviors, different things that leaders can do right now in these uncertain times to make sure that we are communicating well and building our teams, because we have to communicate in the midst of chaos. So number 1, we have to be willing to over-communicate. Over-communicate. Because if we don't control communication, what happens is chaos flourishes. Right now we need to focus on people. And unfortunately, right now there are companies that say they focus on people, but you're only getting an email once a week from the CEO or from someone in HR. And what that does is it builds confusion. And it allows people to create their own spheres of chaos. So right now, we have to be willing to over-communicate. Maybe you have to fill out your schedule more than you used to. Maybe you need to send those extra emails. Maybe you need to figure out just what it is that your team needs. But if you don't over-communicate right now, I guarantee you what you'll find is you'll find people confused. And so the first principle we have to do is we have to be willing to over-communicate. Second, we have to be willing to really extend an overabundance of grace. Because you see, when you're in the middle of chaos, you don't know where everyone has been. You don't know how everyone is responding to this coronavirus that's really shut down most of our culture right now. Some people respond with fear. Some people respond with anxiety. Some people respond with courage and valor. But you don't know how people respond. And not everybody shares the same passion as you do for your company. Not everybody holds the same position or title or, even has the same amount of tenure. Not everybody's a veteran. And so right now, you have to be willing to extend that abundance of grace. Just be kind. When you think about humanity right now, give that new person a little bit of grace, right? Give people in your company that extra measure right now, because that's what's going to get people through. Not only do we need to do that, but we have to understand right now, thirdly, is that culture, it's not your office building. Actually, culture is the shared vision of a people group. And so what we know, a matter of fact, author Andy Stanley told us in his book, Vision Leaks. That's what he said. And if we know that vision leaks, what we have to do is we have to be willing to cast that vision more and more and more. Matter of fact, leaders right now aren't leading their people well if they're not casting their vision. Not only casting the vision, but reminding people of the vision. For us at U.S. Compliance, all of our communication right now goes around how are we caring, how are we protecting, and how are we growing? Because that's our vision. And so as leaders, we have to be willing to not only extend that grace, right? But we have to be willing to cast vision, and we have to be willing to do it a lot. Because if we're not, what we're doing is, again, we're just adding to the chaos and the confusion. Next, number 4, we have to have a clarity of expectations. See, as leaders, it's our job to be the ones to clarify expectations. You know, one of the things in my many years of working with leaders as a consultant, that I meet with people from frontline manufacturing supervisors all the way up to Fortune 100 CEOs. And one thing that I've seen in all of those different scenarios is that people try to hold their team members accountable for unclear expectations. That is a cardinal sin of leadership. We cannot hold people accountable to things that they didn't even know was part of their duty or responsibility. So as we clarify expectations right now, many different companies are working from home. They're working remote. And so have you clarified with your team what your expectations are around that? Because if you haven't, then what you're going to see is more and more confusion, and that only adds to the chaos that we're seeing right now. And so really, to dig down even deeper, a pragmatic approach to that is to ask your team, how do you prefer I communicate with you right now? And ask different team members how they prefer to be communicated to. Because especially in a remote environment, maybe their schedule is going to look a little bit different. Maybe they're home with the kids right now. Maybe we have to understand that things are different in the midst of chaos. So for us, when we clarify expectations, we are allowed to hold people accountable for that clarity. And number 5 is we need to embrace the creativity of our teams right now. You know, it's amazing, but in times like this, what happens is we see innovation flourish. It's one of the beauties and the silver lining, if you will, behind times such as this. Because what happens is innovation grows when people collaborate. And maybe that collaboration looks a little bit different right now. Maybe it's through a screen instead of walking to the office next door. But either way, we have to be willing to be able to see the innovation, and we have to be willing to challenge our team to find creative solutions to some pretty complex problems right now. But in doing so, make sure that you're aware of your team's body language. Make sure that your tone is appropriate, right? Make sure that as we're embracing those innovative times together, that you challenge your teams to find the solutions that not only will help the crisis, but could actually launch different venues of even revenue streams in the future for your company. Number 6. Number 6 is one that I think I've struggled with in my career, and most leaders I've talked to have. It's listening well and asking great questions. See, a lot of times communicators, what they do is they'll pretend they're listening, but they're waiting just long enough for that person to stop talking so that I can share my input. But right now, we need leaders that have the courage to listen to understand, that listen to comprehend, that listen to show empathy. Because as we listen right now, we're going to be willing to then restate what we've heard, and especially with this new way of doing business. Because when you're on a screen, you have to be willing to say, hey, did I hear you correctly in what you just said? We have to be willing to clarify, because what that does is it shows that we're listening well. And let's be honest, most of the time people, they love talking about themselves. So just ask them great questions right now. Ask them, hey, how are you doing in the midst of this chaos? Ask them, what should we be worried about right now? Ask them, what should we start doing or stop doing? Ask them what I should focus on right now. And you know what happens when we do that? People really see that I care, and they see that I'm listening well. And that leads us to number 7. Because number 7 is we have to be willing, last but certainly not least, to be vulnerable. Now, being vulnerable doesn't mean that I have to, share all of my deep, darkest secrets and I have to open up the closet to all of my skeletons. No, certainly not. But what it does mean is that I have to be willing now to maybe share in a way that I've never shared before. Maybe I have to go there with some of my team members because I just have to be willing to go that extra step right now. Because in order for us to lead well through these times of chaos and uncertainty, we have to communicate well. Now, we don't have to go all Brene Brown on it, right? And the power of vulnerability, but why not? What would it look like if your team members felt more safe and felt more secure in talking to you as their leader? Or what if you challenged your team members to feel that way with each other right now? You would be able to bring such unity in your team that together you would be able to make it not just through and not just to survive this time. You would make it as though your team were thriving. So, just remember, we're all in this together. We need to look together at opportunities to grow and develop, and hopefully these 7 thoughts and practices will help you become a better leader as you communicate in the midst of this chaos.